Margaret Walsh built a 45 million empire with nothing but grit and sleepless nights. But the person who nearly destroyed it all wasn't a rival. It was her best friend. What started as trust ended in betrayal so brutal, it left scars money could never heal. Welcome to Her True Stories, where truth is stranger than fiction. If you're ready for a story that will make your blood boil and your heart race, then you've come to the right place. Hit that subscribe button right now, because today's story is about a 62-year-old woman named Margaret Walsh who discovered that sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones who call themselves your best friend. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single twist in this tale of friendship betrayal, financial fraud, and the most devastating revenge you'll ever hear. My name is Margaret Walsh, and at 62 years old, I thought I understood the true value of loyalty. When you build a successful chain of boutique hotels worth $45 million from nothing but determination and sleepless nights, you learn that trust doesn't come cheap. It costs everything, lies about everything, and sometimes destroys everything. But I never imagined that the greatest threat to my life's work would come wearing my best friend's smile and calling me sister. The Walsh Hotel Group sprawled across 8 luxury properties throughout Northern California, each one a testament to my 30 years of backbreaking work in the hospitality industry. The flagship location in Napa Valley was my crown jewel. 120 rooms of handcrafted elegance, vineyard views that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and a spa that celebrities flew across the country to experience. It was beautiful, profitable, and utterly consuming. Since my husband David died 7 years ago, leaving me to manage an empire I'd built with my own hands. That Wednesday morning in September started like any other. I was in my corporate office reviewing occupancy reports from our Sonoma location when I heard the familiar click of Linda's heels coming down the marble hallway. My 58-year-old business partner rarely visited without bringing both good news and expensive champagne, and as I watched her through my glass office door, I could see the excitement in her stride, even from across the room. Linda Chen had always been stunning in that effortlessly sophisticated way that made boardroom negotiations look like social gatherings. But lately, something had changed. The easy partnership of our early years had been replaced by a competitive edge that made me uncomfortable. It was the look of a woman who'd tasted power and found it intoxicating. "Margaret," she said, bursting into my office without her usual knock, her designer suit immaculate and her usually perfect composure slightly breathless. "We need to celebrate." I set down my financial reports and studied my partner's face. There was a flush in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that reminded me of our early days when every small victory felt monumental. "What's the occasion?" "The Monterey acquisition," Linda said, practically bouncing as she settled into the leather chair across from my mahogany desk. "I closed the deal this morning. We're expanding to the coast." Here we go again, I thought. Linda's ambitious expansion plans had been growing more aggressive each quarter. Her latest obsession involved purchasing distressed properties throughout California, projects that required massive capital investments and carried substantial risk. Each venture was followed by elaborate presentations about market opportunities and growth potential. But the results were always the same. Our cash reserves got lighter, while Linda's promises got bigger. "How much?" I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know the answer. $8.5 million. The number hung in the air between us like smoke from a gunshot. It was more than we'd ever spent on a single acquisition. And the way she said it, like she was ordering lunch, set off every warning bell in my business-trained mind. "That's a substantial investment, Linda. What's the timeline for profitability?" "It's a luxury beachfront resort. Revolutionary oceanfront hospitality experience that's going to change everything." Her words came out in a practiced rush, like she'd rehearsed this pitch in the mirror. "My contact has connections with high-end travel agencies, and we're projecting 8-figure revenues in the first year alone." I'd heard variations of this song before, and it never ended with the promised returns. Who conducted the structural inspection? Linda's eyes flickered away from mine. You don't know the firm? They're from San Diego. Engineering background, proven track record. What's the firm's name? Margaret. Why does it matter? The opportunity is what's important here. The evasion was telling. In 20 years of business partnership, I'd learned to recognize the sound of corners being cut. Linda was hiding something. And whatever it was, it required $8.5 million to fix. Linda, we've had this conversation before, multiple times. Major acquisitions require board approval and thorough due diligence. Perhaps we should schedule a proper presentation for next week with all the documentation. The transformation was immediate and frightening. Linda's face darkened and her hands clenched into fists on her lap. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes that reminded me of my ex-business manager who'd tried to embezzle from us before I fired him 5 years ago. Board approval? Linda's voice rose to a near shout. What board, Margaret? Do you have any idea what it's like to work in the shadow of all this? She gestured wildly at the opulent office around us. Everyone expects me to be successful because I'm partners with Margaret Walsh. But how can I compete when you control everything? I've given you every opportunity to grow. Opportunities? Linda laughed bitterly. You've given me just enough authority to look important, but never enough to actually succeed. Just enough to make me look like a junior partner who can't make it on her own, but never enough to build something that's truly mine. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. I had been protective of final decision-making authority, perhaps too protective, but I'd seen too many successful partnerships destroyed by partners who confused bold moves with reckless gambling. Linda, calm down. Let's discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss. I need this deal and I need it now. This isn't a request, Margaret. It's a necessity. Give me your signature, Margaret. You'll regret missing this opportunity anyway. Something in her tone made my blood run cold. This wasn't the petulant demand of a frustrated business partner. This was something else entirely, something that felt dangerously close to a threat. The answer is no, Linda. I won't approve this acquisition without proper documentation. She stood up so abruptly that her chair rocked backward. Fine. But don't come crying to me when you're older and alone because you chose caution over partnership. The words hit like a slap, but it was the cold calculation in her eyes that really terrified me. This wasn't anger anymore. This was something much worse. Linda, is there something you're not telling me? Are you in some kind of financial trouble? For just a moment, her mask slipped completely. I saw fear there, and desperation, and something that looked like genuine panic. But then the cold expression returned, and she headed for the door. Forget I asked, she said, without turning around. I'll figure it out myself. As Linda's heels clicked away down the marble hallway, I sat alone in my office, feeling like I'd just dodged a bullet I didn't understand. Something was very wrong with my business partner. And whatever it was, it required $8.5 million to solve. I picked up the phone to call our company attorney, then set it down again. Linda was my partner, my friend of 20 years. Whatever trouble she was in, we could work through it together. 3 days later, Linda returned with her assistant, Trevor, and immediately, I knew this wasn't a business meeting. Where Linda's previous approach had been emotional and direct, this felt calculated and strategic. They arrived at exactly 2:00 p.m., not early enough to seem overeager, not late enough to appear disrespectful. The timing felt deliberate. I watched from my office window as they got out of Linda's Tesla. Even from a distance, Trevor commanded attention. He was handsome in that sharp, ambitious way that made junior executives look like senior management, dark hair perfectly styled, expensive suit that fit his athletic frame flawlessly, and an aura of confidence that came from knowing he was the smartest person in most rooms. Linda and Trevor had been working together for 6 months, but I'd never felt entirely comfortable around my partner's new assistant. There was something theatrical about his interactions with everyone, like he was constantly performing rather than being genuine. He always said exactly what people wanted to hear, but his eyes remained calculating and cold. "Margaret, I hope you don't mind me bringing Trevor," Linda said as they entered my office. Trevor carrying 2 cups of our signature hotel coffee in ceramic mugs from our executive dining room. He moved with the kind of practiced grace that made every gesture look like a performance. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a month, and her makeup was flawless despite the afternoon hour. Everything about her appearance suggested someone who'd spent considerable time preparing for this meeting. "I thought you might want to try this," Trevor said, extending one of the cups toward me with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "It's a special blend from our new supplier, Colombian beans with hints of vanilla and caramel. I thought you might appreciate the craftsmanship." The coffee smelled wrong. Not bad exactly, but sharp and bitter with an underlying metallic odor that reminded me of cleaning supplies mixed with something medicinal. After 30 years of managing hotels, you develop an instinct for anything that seems off. Every nerve in my body was screaming that something wasn't right, but I kept my expression neutral. "How thoughtful of you both," I said, accepting the cup while studying Trevor's face. He was watching me with an intensity that felt predatory, like a cat watching a mouse approach a trap. Linda positioned herself by my office door, and I noticed she wouldn't meet my eyes directly. Her usual animated energy had been replaced by a nervous stillness that made her look like she was holding her breath. When I glanced at her, she quickly looked away, focusing on her phone with obvious discomfort. "Linda tells me you had some concerns about our Monterey expansion," Trevor said, settling gracefully into the chair across from me with his own cup. "I thought we might address those concerns and discuss the broader vision for Walsh Hotel Group's future." The way he said broader vision made it sound like I was holding the company back with my small-minded thinking. I noticed he hadn't taken a sip of his coffee yet, despite encouraging me to try mine. "We had a discussion about due diligence and proper procedures," I said carefully. "Major acquisitions require careful analysis and board approval." "Of course," Trevor agreed, his smile never wavering. Though sometimes in business, opportunity moves faster than traditional processes allow. The most successful companies are those that can adapt quickly to market conditions. When Trevor turned slightly to check something on his tablet, I made a split-second decision that would save my company. Using the moment when his attention was diverted, I quickly switched our cups. They were identical white ceramic mugs, and the exchange took less than 2 seconds. "Linda mentioned you have concerns about the financing structure," I said, testing to see how much Trevor knew about our company's financial situation. "Perhaps you could walk me through your projections." Something flickered in Trevor's eyes. "Surprise, maybe, or annoyance?" "Yes, I'm very excited about the growth potential. The hospitality industry rewards bold vision." "And the inspection reports?" Linda mentioned a San Diego firm. Trevor hummed non-committally, raising his cup, which was now my original one, to his lips. Due diligence is always important, naturally. We chatted about market trends while I pretended to sip my coffee and watched Trevor take his first real drink. His face twisted slightly, like he'd tasted something unexpected, and I saw his eyes widen with what looked like confusion, but he said nothing about the flavor, which was interesting. "This is excellent," I lied, setting my cup down after another fake sip. "You'll have to tell me more about this supplier." "Specialty Coffee Solutions," Trevor said absently, and I could see his mind working, trying to process something that didn't make sense to him. Linda was checking her watch with increasing frequency, and there was a tension in the room that felt like electricity before a storm. Whatever they'd come here to accomplish wasn't going according to plan. 25 minutes later, Trevor started sweating. It began as a light sheen on his forehead, but quickly escalated into obvious discomfort that made his expensive shirt cling to his body. His face flushed red, then began taking on a grayish pallor that made him look genuinely ill. "Something's wrong," he said, gripping the edge of my desk as tremors started in his hands. His voice was becoming strained and unsteady. I don't feel right. Something's very wrong. Linda rushed over from her position by the door, her concern appearing genuine, or at least well-acted. Trevor, what's happening? Are you having some kind of reaction? Hospital, he managed, his breathing becoming increasingly labored. Need to get to a hospital now. As we rushed to prepare for the emergency room, Trevor, leaning heavily on Linda while making appropriately distressed noises, one thought kept repeating in my mind. That coffee had been meant for me. Which meant my trusted business partner and her assistant had just poisoned him with their own weapon. The irony was so perfect, it almost made me smile. The ride to St. Mary's Hospital felt like a scene from a medical thriller, complete with Trevor's increasingly dramatic symptoms and Linda's perfectly calibrated panic. I sat in the back seat watching this performance unfold and marveled at the precision of their planning. Trevor's hands were shaking uncontrollably. His skin was clammy and pale, and he was clutching his stomach like he was fighting waves of nausea. If I hadn't known better, I would have been genuinely worried about his condition. But knowing what I knew about the coffee's intended target, I found myself studying his symptoms with detached fascination. How are you feeling? Linda asked for the fourth time in 15 minutes, her voice pitched perfectly between concern and fear. Just hold on. We're almost there. Burns. Trevor managed between waves of nausea, stomach burning, can't think straight. I realized the metallic smell, the gastrointestinal distress, the confusion. Someone had done their homework. This looked like heavy metal poisoning, possibly mercury or lead. It was slow-acting, difficult to detect without specific tests, and would cause exactly the symptoms Trevor was experiencing. If he'd given me the full dose intended for my body weight, I would likely be in critical condition by now. The emergency room at St. Mary's was controlled chaos, with the usual mix of genuine emergencies and minor complaints that made triage such a delicate balance. But Trevor's condition was dramatic enough to get immediate attention. "We need help," Linda called out as we entered, supporting Trevor, who was now making retching sounds that would have been alarming if they weren't so perfectly timed. "My colleague is very ill." The medical team responded with impressive efficiency. Within minutes, Trevor was on a gurney, hooked up to monitors, and surrounded by nurses taking vitals and asking rapid-fire questions. "When did the symptoms start?" Dr. Sarah Kim asked, clipboard in hand and stethoscope around her neck. "About 40 minutes ago," Linda answered, playing the role of concerned colleague to perfection. "He was fine during our meeting, then suddenly became ill." "Any known allergies, medications, recent changes in diet or environment?" "Nothing unusual," Linda said. "He's always been perfectly healthy." I watched this exchange with growing fascination. Linda was answering all the questions smoothly, never hesitating, never appearing uncertain. Either she was remarkably calm under pressure, or she'd prepared for exactly this scenario. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Kim addressed Trevor directly. "Can you tell me what you were doing just before the symptoms started?" "Coffee," Trevor whispered, his voice barely audible. "Having coffee with her." His eyes found mine across the small examination area. The way he said "her" carried an unmistakable note of accusation. Even in his supposedly weakened state, Trevor was already laying the groundwork for what was to come. Dr. Kim followed Trevor's gaze to me. "Are you involved with this gentleman's care?" "I'm his employer," I said. "We were having a business meeting when he became ill." "Did you both consume the same beverages?" "Similar," I said carefully. Trevor prepared the coffee. 2 cups from the same source. Dr. Kim made notes on her clipboard, and I could see the wheels turning in her medical mind. Food poisoning was always a possibility when multiple people consumed the same substance. But only one person getting sick suggested either an allergic reaction or something more sinister. "We're going to run some comprehensive blood tests," Dr. Kim announced. "In the meantime, Let's get you on IV fluids and see if we can make you more comfortable." As the medical team worked on Trevor, Linda turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Margaret, I should probably call our insurance company," she said. "You know how these situations can get complicated." "Of course," I said, patting her arm. "Take all the time you need." It was interesting how quickly Linda was thinking about liability issues, especially when her assistant was potentially fighting for his life. Either she was remarkably practical under stress or she had other priorities beyond Trevor's well-being. I settled into the uncomfortable plastic chair in the waiting area, surrounded by the familiar sounds of medical emergencies and human suffering. The magazines were outdated, the vending machine coffee was terrible, and the fluorescent lighting made everyone look slightly deceased. It was the perfect setting for contemplating attempted corporate sabotage. 4 hours later, Linda returned with a briefcase, looking appropriately exhausted and worried. Her timing was impeccable. She walked through the door, just as Dr. Kim emerged from the treatment area with news. "We found elevated levels of mercury in his bloodstream," Dr. Kim announced with clinical precision. "This appears to be deliberate poisoning. I'm required by law to contact the authorities." Mercury. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Linda's face went pale, and she grabbed my arm as if seeking support. "Poisoning," she repeated, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine shock. But how? Who would do something like that? Before Dr. Kim could answer, Trevor's voice rang out from behind the curtain. Weak, but remarkably clear for someone who'd been at death's door. "She did it," Trevor said, his finger pointing directly at me when the curtain was pulled back. "Margaret poisoned my coffee. She tried to kill me." The accusation hit the room like a bomb. Dr. Kim stared at me with a mixture of shock and suspicion, while Linda looked like she'd been slapped. "That's impossible," Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Margaret would never." "She made the coffee herself," Trevor continued, his voice getting stronger with each word. "She handed it to me personally. She watched me drink it." Well, that was gratitude for you. Here, I'd inadvertently saved myself by switching cups, and he was repaying the favor by trying to frame me for attempted murder. The irony was delicious, even if the consequences were likely to be serious. Detective Patricia Reeves arrived at the hospital within 40 minutes of Dr. Kim's call, which suggested that attempted murder cases received priority attention in our quiet California city. She was older than I'd expected, maybe late 50s, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing and the patient demeanor of someone who'd heard every lie in the book. "Ms. Walsh," Detective Reeves said, introducing herself with a firm handshake. "I understand there's been an incident involving poisoning. I'd like to speak with you privately if that's all right." We moved to a small consultation room down the hall from where Trevor was still receiving treatment. The room was sterile and windowless, designed for delivering bad news and uncomfortable conversations. "I want to be clear from the start," Detective Reeves began, opening her notebook. "You're not under arrest, and you're free to leave at any time, but I need to understand what happened here today." I told her exactly what had occurred, the strange smell in the coffee, my instinct to switch the cups, Trevor drinking what was originally meant for me. I kept my explanation factual and straightforward, the way I'd learned to present information during my years building the business. "Ms. Walsh," Detective Reeves said when I finished, "if you suspected the coffee was dangerous, why didn't you simply refuse to drink it or warn Mr. Hayes?" It was the logical question, and one I'd been preparing to answer since the moment Trevor started sweating. "I wasn't completely certain something was wrong," I said. It was more of an instinct than a concrete suspicion. I thought switching the cups would be a way to test my concerns without creating unnecessary drama if I was wrong. "And when Mr. Discrowd, Hayes, became ill, you realized your instinct had been correct? Someone had tried to poison me, and Trevor had accidentally become the victim instead." Detective Reeves made careful notes, her expression revealing nothing about whether she believed my story. Who else knew about this business meeting today? Only Linda and Trevor. It was arranged this morning. Had you been experiencing any threats lately? Anyone who might want to harm you? I thought about Linda's desperate push for the Monterey acquisition and her angry departure 3 days earlier, but something held me back from mentioning it. Whatever my business partner was involved in, I wanted to understand it fully before involving the police. Nothing specific, I said. When you have a successful business, you're always aware that some people might see you as a target. When Detective Reeves interviewed Linda, I could hear the conversation through the thin walls of the consultation room. My business partner's responses sent chills down my spine. Margaret's been acting strange lately, Linda said, her voice carrying clearly through the wall. More paranoid than usual, suspicious of everyone's motives. I think the stress of running the company alone has been affecting her judgment. In what way? Just little things, questioning every decision, making comments about people trying to steal from her, becoming increasingly isolated. I thought it was just business stress, but now, the doubt in Linda's voice was unmistakable. My own business partner was throwing me under the bus, creating reasonable doubt about my mental state and suggesting I might be capable of poisoning my own employees. Has she ever expressed any direct hostility toward Mr. Hayes? She's never said anything outright threatening, but there's been tension. Margaret can be very controlling when it comes to company decisions. She doesn't like anyone she thinks might be undermining her authority. Each word was a carefully placed knife in my back. Linda was painting a picture of a paranoid, controlling businesswoman who might poison her own assistant out of jealousy and suspicion. It was brilliant character assassination, and it was coming from someone I'd trusted for 20 years. When Detective Reeves returned to question me further, her entire demeanor had changed. The polite professional courtesy had been replaced by barely concealed suspicion. Ms. Walsh, I need to ask you some direct questions. Have you been concerned about Mr. Hayes' influence within your company? The question was clearly based on what Linda had told her. I chose my words carefully. I think it's natural for any business owner to be protective of their company's interests, but I've never had any specific reason to distrust Trevor. Your business partner mentioned that you've been acting more suspicious lately. Is there any truth to that? I don't believe I've been acting any differently than usual. Linda may be interpreting normal business caution as suspicion. Detective Reeves made more notes, and I could see her building a case in her mind. Successful older businesswoman, suspicious of young male assistant, history of controlling behavior, opportunity and means to commit poisoning. Ms. Walsh, I'm going to need to examine your business premises as part of this investigation. Do I have your permission to conduct a search? I knew I could refuse and demand a warrant, but that would only make me look more guilty. Of course. I have nothing to hide. We'll also need to examine any computers, phones, or other devices that might contain relevant information. Whatever you need, Detective. As we prepared to leave the hospital, I caught one last glimpse of Trevor through the gap in his room's curtain. He was sitting up in bed, no longer appearing to struggle with nausea, engaged in quiet conversation with a nurse. When he saw me looking, he offered a small, satisfied smile that made my blood run cold. That smile told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The search of my corporate offices was thorough, professional, and utterly devastating. Detective Reeves arrived with a full forensics team and a warrant that gave them permission to examine every inch of my business premises. I watched from my office as strangers in latex gloves went through my most personal and professional possessions, looking for evidence that I was a would-be murderer. We appreciate your cooperation, Ms. Walsh, Detective Reeves said as her team spread throughout the building. This should only take a few hours. I sat in the conference room, the same space where Linda had demanded approval for the Monterey acquisition just 4 days earlier, and tried to process how quickly my life had spiraled out of control. 96 hours ago, I'd been a successful businesswoman managing a thriving hotel empire. Now, I was the prime suspect in an attempted murder case. The forensics team worked with methodical precision, photographing everything, dusting for fingerprints, and collecting samples from surfaces throughout the office complex. They paid particular attention to the executive kitchen, where Trevor claimed to have prepared the poisoned coffee. "Ma'am," one of the technicians called from the kitchen area, "can you show us where the coffee supplies are kept?" I led them to the supply cabinet where our office manager kept various coffee beans, filters, and accessories. Everything looked normal to me, but the technicians treated each item like potential evidence, carefully bagging and labeling anything that might have come into contact with poison. "What about cleaning supplies?" Detective Reeves asked. "Anything that might contain chemical compounds?" I showed them to the utility closet where we kept the usual office chemicals: floor cleaners, disinfectants, glass cleaners, and various other toxic substances that could be found in any commercial building. Again, they photographed and sampled everything. 3 hours into the search, I heard one of the technicians call out from my private office, "Detective Reeves, you need to see this." The excitement in his voice made my stomach clench with dread. I followed Detective Reeves to my office, dreading what they might have found. In my desk drawer, a drawer I accessed daily and knew intimately, they discovered a small glass vial hidden behind my personal files. The vial contained traces of a clear liquid, and beside it was a handwritten note that included Trevor's name along with what appeared to be dosage calculations. "Ms. Walsh," Detective Reeves said, holding up an evidence bag containing the vial and note, "can you explain these items?" I stared at the evidence, feeling the world tilt around me. The handwriting on the note looked remarkably similar to mine, though I had no memory of writing anything like it. The vial was completely unfamiliar. "I've never seen either of those items before," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "This is your handwriting, isn't it?" Detective Reeves pressed, showing me the note more closely. Looking at it carefully, I had to admit that it did resemble my handwriting. The formation of the letters, the particular way I crossed my T's and dotted my I's. Whoever had written this had either studied my writing extensively, or the timeline was impossible to ignore. While we were at the hospital this morning, Linda had left for several hours supposedly to handle business matters. She would have had complete access to my office during that time. "Are you suggesting someone planted this evidence?" Detective Reeves asked when I mentioned the timeline. The words sounded paranoid even as I said them, but I couldn't ignore the obvious facts. "I'm saying that someone with access to my office and knowledge of my handwriting could have placed these items here while we were at the hospital." "Ms. Walsh, that's a very serious accusation to make against your business partner." "It's not an accusation. It's an observation about opportunity and access." But even as I said it, I could see the doubt in Detective Reeves' eyes. The desperate businesswoman caught red-handed with evidence of attempted murder, trying to blame her innocent partner. It was exactly the kind of deflection that guilty people attempted when cornered. "We'll be taking these items for analysis," Detective Reeves said, sealing the evidence bags, "along with samples of your handwriting for comparison." "Of course." "Miss Walsh, I have to ask, do you own any weapons?" The question caught me off guard. "I have pepper spray in my purse for personal protection." "Why?" "We'll need to examine that as well." I retrieved the pepper spray from my handbag and watched them bag it as evidence. I was beginning to understand that in a criminal investigation, everything was potentially relevant until proven otherwise. As the search team finished their work, Detective Reeves pulled me aside for a final conversation. "Ms. Walsh, based on what we found today, I need to inform you that you're now considered the primary suspect in this case. I strongly recommend that you contact an attorney." "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time, but I advise you not to leave the state without notifying my office." After the police left, I walked through my office complex, seeing it with new eyes. Rooms that had been photographed and searched, surfaces that had been dusted for fingerprints, files that had been examined for evidence of criminal intent. My professional sanctuary had been violated, and I felt like a stranger in my own company. But more than that, I felt the weight of betrayal settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Someone had planned this carefully, planting evidence that would point directly to me while creating a perfect cover story. And the only person who'd had the opportunity, access, and knowledge to do it was my business partner of 20 years. That night, I sat in my home office with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights visible through my window. The Walsh Hotel Group continued its steady operations, generating wealth and providing luxury experiences just as it had for 3 decades. But for the first time since building this empire, I wondered if it would all be destroyed by one person's greed. Linda hadn't just tried to steal from me. She'd tried to poison me and frame me for attempted murder of her own accomplice. The complexity and cruelty of the plan took my breath away. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her business partner. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd kept in my contacts for emergencies. Harrison Security Consulting. Robert Harrison. It's Margaret Walsh. I need your help. Someone's trying to destroy me, and I think it might be my own business partner. Robert Harrison had been my go-to investigator for sensitive business matters for 15 years. More importantly, he was the only person who truly understood how corporate espionage worked in the modern world. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it would be him. Margaret, Harrison said, his voice immediately shifting to the sharp focus I remembered from previous cases. Tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail. Harrison listened without interruption as I explained the entire sequence of events. Linda's desperate request for acquisition approval, the poisoned coffee, the convenient evidence planted in my office, and Linda's calculated betrayal during the police interviews. Jesus, Harrison said when I finished. If Linda is behind this, we're dealing with attempted murder and conspiracy charges. This isn't just about business disagreements anymore. I know. The question is, how to prove it. First things first, you need criminal defense representation immediately. I'm going to call Marcus Webb. He's the best defense attorney on the West Coast, and he owes me a favor from the Richardson case. Harrison, there's something else. I think Linda might be in serious trouble with dangerous people. The way she demanded that acquisition money, the desperation in her voice, this feels like more than just another ambitious business deal. What kind of trouble? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. If Linda is involved with criminals, it might explain why she's willing to commit murder for business control. Harrison was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him thinking, I still have contacts in financial crime investigation. Let me make some discreet inquiries about Linda's recent activities. But in the meantime, you need to assume you're under surveillance. Everything you do, everywhere you go, everyone you talk to, the police will be watching. I understand. And be very careful around Linda and Trevor. If they're willing to commit murder once, they won't hesitate to try again. Marcus Webb arrived at my house that evening carrying a briefcase and the kind of serious expression that defense attorneys wore when their clients were in deep trouble. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 50s, but Harrison had assured me that his age was offset by his brilliance and his complete lack of ethics when it came to protecting his clients. Ms. Walsh, Marcus said, settling into my living room like he owned the place. Harrison has briefed me on your situation. You're in significant legal jeopardy, but the case against you has some interesting weaknesses. Such as? The timeline, for one. The poisoning appears to have been planned in advance. But you had no way of knowing that Linda and Trevor would visit you this afternoon. If you were planning to poison Trevor, you would need advance notice of his presence. Unless the prosecution argues that I was planning to poison Linda and Trevor was an unintended victim, Marcus nodded approvingly. Exactly the kind of thinking that made you a successful businesswoman. Yes, they could argue that. But there's another problem with their case. Motive. Meaning, why would you want to kill Trevor? He's just Linda's assistant. His death wouldn't benefit you professionally or financially. In fact, it would complicate your business relationship with Linda significantly. I thought about the life insurance policy I suspected might exist on key employees, but decided to keep that information to myself for now. What about Linda? They could argue I wanted to eliminate her to maintain control of the company. Possibly, but that's a weak motive for murder. Business disputes are settled through litigation and buyout agreements, not poison. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad. Tell me about the evidence they found in your office, the vial and the handwritten note. I described the items in detail, emphasizing how the handwriting looked like mine, but that I had no memory of creating the note. Marcus made careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about the timeline and Linda's access to my office. The planted evidence is actually our strongest defense, Marcus said. It's almost too convenient. Real poisoners don't usually leave behind signed confessions with their victim's name and dosage calculations. What's our next step? We need to investigate Linda and Trevor independently. If they're running a con, there will be evidence, financial records, communication patterns, possibly even previous incidents. Previous incidents? Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. If your business partner is willing to murder her own partner for company control, this probably isn't her first rodeo. People don't usually jump straight to attempted murder without working their way up through smaller crimes. The thought sent ice through my veins. You think they've done this before? I think we need to find out. Harrison is already running background checks on both of them. If there are any red flags in their past, we'll find them. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. I'd installed a comprehensive security system years ago, but knowing that Linda had keys and access codes made it feel useless. Around 3:00 a.m., I heard a car in my driveway. From my bedroom window, I could see Linda's Tesla parked near the front entrance. I watched as she sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, making phone calls and appearing increasingly agitated. Finally, she got out and approached the house. Instead of using her key, she knocked softly on the front door. When I didn't answer, she tried the handle and found it locked. She walked around the perimeter of the house, testing windows and checking for other entry points. This wasn't the behavior of a concerned business partner checking on a friend. This was reconnaissance. After 20 minutes, Linda gave up and drove away. I immediately called Marcus Webb. She was casing the house, I told Marcus, looking for ways to get inside without using her key. Did you record any of this? The security cameras should have captured everything. Perfect. Don't touch those recordings. We'll need them if this goes to trial. The next morning brought more bad news. Detective Reeves called to inform me that the preliminary forensics results had confirmed my fingerprints on the poison vial and that the handwriting analysis was consistent with my writing samples. Ms. Walsh, Detective Reeves said, I need you to come to the station for additional questioning. You have the right to have your attorney present. We'll be there this afternoon, I told her, then immediately called Marcus. They're moving faster than I expected, Marcus said. This feels like they're building toward an arrest. We need to accelerate our own investigation. That afternoon, as Marcus and I sat in the police station waiting room, I felt the walls closing in around me. The evidence against me was circumstantial, but compelling. I had motive protecting company control. I had means access to poison. I had opportunity preparing the coffee. The planted evidence provided the smoking gun that would convince a jury of my guilt. Ms. Walsh, Detective Reeves said when we were finally called into the interview room, we've received additional forensic results that I think you should be aware of. Marcus leaned forward slightly. What kind of results? The poison found in Mr. Hayes' bloodstream is an exact match for the substance in the vial recovered from Ms. Walsh's office. We also found traces of the same substance on a coffee mug in your executive kitchen. My heart sank. They'd found physical evidence linking me directly to the crime. Even if I could prove the evidence was planted, it would be difficult to convince a jury that someone had gone to such elaborate lengths to frame me. "Detective Reeves," Marcus said smoothly, "my client maintains her innocence. This evidence is clearly the result of contamination or tampering. By whom? By the real perpetrator who had access to Ms. Walsh's office while she was at the hospital. You're suggesting that someone else poisoned Mr. Hayes, then broke into Ms. Walsh's office to plant evidence. I'm suggesting that the timeline and circumstances don't support the conclusion that my client is guilty of this crime." But I could see in Detective Reeves' eyes that she'd already made up her mind. To her, I was a successful businesswoman who'd tried to murder her partner's assistant and was now desperately trying to blame her innocent colleague. "Miss Walsh?" Detective Reeves said, "Based on the evidence we've gathered, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder." As the handcuffs clicked around my wrists, I looked at Marcus and saw my own fears reflected in his eyes. Linda and Trevor had played this perfectly, and I was about to pay the price for underestimating my own business partner. But as they led me toward the patrol car, one thought kept me from despair. They'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me alive, and as long as I was breathing, I wasn't finished fighting. The county jail was everything I'd expected, and worse. Gray, concrete walls, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look dead, and the constant sound of metal doors slamming shut. I'd visited places like this during business community outreach programs, but experiencing it firsthand was profoundly different. My cellmate was a woman named Rosa Martinez, arrested for embezzlement and surprisingly philosophical about the experience. "First time?" she asked, as I tried to make myself comfortable on the narrow bunk. "Unfortunately, yes. What did you do?" "They think I tried to poison my business partner's assistant." Rosa whistled low. "Business drama. That's always the messiest kind of crime." "Honey, everybody in here didn't do it, but the real question is, can you prove you didn't do it?" That was exactly the question keeping me awake at night. Marcus had warned me that proving innocence was much harder than establishing reasonable doubt, especially when the evidence was as seemingly solid as what they'd assembled against me. The bail hearing was set for Monday morning, 3 days away. Marcus was confident he could get me released. But the prosecution was arguing that I was a flight risk due to my substantial wealth and that I posed a danger to potential witnesses. "The district attorney is treating this like a high-profile case," Marcus explained during one of his visits. "They think convicting a successful businesswoman will be good publicity." "What about our investigation into Linda and Trevor?" "Harrison is making progress, but it's slow going. We've confirmed that Linda has significant gambling debts over 400 to some very unsavory people. That gives her clear motive for needing company assets quickly." 400. The number staggered me. How did she accumulate that kind of debt? High-stakes poker games, sports betting, some kind of cryptocurrency speculation that went wrong. The point is, she was desperate enough to do something drastic. "What about Trevor?" Marcus's expression darkened. "That's where it gets interesting. Trevor Hayes doesn't exist." I felt my pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" "The identity is fake. Created about 8 months ago with forged documents and a fabricated background. Harrison traced his real identity to a man named Vincent Sterling, who has a criminal record in 4 states. "What kind of record?" "Identity theft. Fraud. And get this, suspected involvement in a suspicious death of an elderly business owner in Nevada. The case was never prosecuted due to lack of evidence. But the pattern is clear." Suddenly, everything made sense. Linda hadn't just hired an ambitious assistant. She'd partnered with a professional criminal who specialized in exactly the kind of scheme they'd tried to pull on me. "So this was planned from the beginning?" "It looks that way. Vincent probably targeted Linda because of her access to your company's assets, then manipulated her into helping him gain control of the business. But why try to kill me? Why not just embezzle money gradually? Marcus pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Because you're not as easy to steal from as they thought. Harrison did some digging into your corporate structure. 6 months ago, you updated your business partnership agreement to require dual approval for any expenditure over $2 million. If they wanted access to serious money, they needed you out of the way. The memory came flooding back. I'd been concerned about some irregularities in our quarterly reports and had insisted on tighter financial controls. My corporate attorney had suggested the dual approval requirement to prevent any single partner from making catastrophic decisions. Linda knows about the new agreement, Marcus continued. Your attorney's office confirmed that Linda called asking about the partnership structure about 2 months ago. So she knew that killing me wouldn't give her instant access to company assets. Right. But if you were convicted of attempting to murder Trevor, Linda could argue that you weren't of sound mind when you implemented the new controls. She could petition to have them overturned and gain full control of the company. The complexity of their plan was staggering. They hadn't just tried to kill me, they'd tried to destroy my reputation and mental competency so that Linda could seize control of my life's work, even after I'd specifically protected against it. There's more, Marcus said. We found evidence that Linda has been taking out loans against the company's expected future earnings. She owes money to several legitimate lenders and some very illegitimate ones. If she doesn't gain control of your business assets, she's not just broke, she's in physical danger from the people she owes money to. Exactly. These aren't the kind of creditors who accept payment plans. I spent that night staring at the ceiling of my cell, processing the full scope of Linda and Vincent's betrayal. My business partner hadn't just been greedy. She'd been desperate. And desperate people were capable of anything. But knowledge was power. And now I had the ammunition I needed to fight back. Rosa, I said to my cellmate around 2:0 What do you know about getting revenge on people who try to destroy your life? 9. She rolled over and looked at me with new interest. Honey, that depends on how far you're willing to go and how much money you've got to spend. I have more money than I know what to do with. And after what they've put me through, I'm willing to go pretty far. Rosa smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. In that case, you and I need to have a very interesting conversation. The bail hearing was a media circus. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse, and reporters shouted questions as Marcus escorted me through the crowd. Business executive accused of poisoning employee was the headline on every local news station, and I could see the story spreading to regional outlets. Linda and Trevor were in the courtroom, sitting in the front row with their attorney. Trevor looked appropriately recovered but still fragile, while Linda played the role of the shocked business partner torn between loyalty and justice for her assistant. Judge Robert Chen presided over the hearing with the no-nonsense efficiency I remembered from previous business litigation. He listened to the arguments from both sides, reviewed the evidence, and set bail at $1.5 million high enough to make a statement, but not so high as to be punitive. The defendant will surrender her passport and submit to electronic monitoring, Judge Chen announced. She is not to have any contact with the alleged victim or any witnesses in this case. As I was processed for release, Marcus pulled me aside with urgent news. Harrison found something big, he said quietly. Vincent Sterling's real name is actually Marcus Vaughn, and he's wanted by the FBI for a string of similar crimes across multiple states. The FBI? He's been running this scam for over a decade. Elderly business owners in Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. Always the same pattern. Gain their trust, poison them, steal their assets, and disappear. How many victims? At least 5 that we can confirm. Maybe more. The scope of Vincent's criminal enterprise was staggering. He wasn't just a con artist, he was a serial killer who'd turned murder into a business model. Where is he now? That's the problem. After your arrest, both Linda and Vincent disappeared. Their apartment is empty, bank accounts are closed, and nobody knows where they went. My blood ran cold. They're running. It looks that way. But here's the thing. We've been in contact with the FBI, and they're very interested in finally catching Marcus Vaughn. They're willing to work with us. What does that mean for my case? If we can prove that Marcus Vaughn poisoned himself as part of an elaborate frame job, your charges will be dropped immediately, but we need to find him first. That evening, I sat in my home office with an electronic monitoring bracelet around my ankle, feeling like a prisoner in my own house. The media attention had been overwhelming, reporters camping outside my gates, helicopters circling overhead, and a constant stream of phone calls from journalists wanting my side of the story. I refused all interviews, but I watched the coverage with growing anger. Linda was giving carefully orchestrated statements to sympathetic reporters, painting herself as the tragic business partner of a mentally unstable colleague who'd finally snapped under the pressure of corporate stress. Margaret has been increasingly paranoid over the past year, Linda told Channel 7 News. She's made accusations against multiple employees and vendors, claiming they're trying to steal from her. I think the stress of managing such a large company has affected her judgment. It was a masterful performance, designed to support the prosecution's theory that I was suffering from business-related mental decline that had led to irrational and violent behavior. But Linda had made one crucial mistake. In her eagerness to appear on television, she'd revealed that she and Vincent were still in the area. The interview had been conducted at a local hotel, which meant they hadn't fled as far as we'd thought. I called Marcus immediately. "Did you see Linda's interview?" "I saw it. Harrison is already working with the FBI to trace their location." "Marcus, I want to end this. All of it. I'm tired of being reactive. It's time to go on the offensive. What did you have in mind?" "I've been thinking about this since my conversation with Rosa in jail. I want to set a trap. Use myself as bait to draw them out into the open." "Margaret, that's incredibly dangerous. If Marcus Vaughn is willing to commit murder, he won't hesitate to try again." "That's exactly what I'm counting on." The plan I outlined to Marcus was elegant in its simplicity. We would leak information suggesting that I'd hidden evidence that could clear my name documents or recordings that proved Linda and Vincent had framed me. The bait would be irresistible to them, because as long as that evidence existed, they would never be safe. "They'll have to come after me," I explained, "either to steal the evidence or to kill me before I can use it. And when they do, the FBI will be waiting." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "This is either brilliant or suicidal. I'm not sure which. After what they've put me through, I'm not sure I care." The leak was carefully orchestrated through Harrison's media contacts. By the next morning, rumors were circulating that Margaret Walsh had discovered evidence proving her innocence and was planning to present it to authorities within 48 hours. The story was vague enough to be believable, but specific enough to create urgency. If Linda and Vincent thought I had evidence that could expose them, they would have to act quickly. All I had to do was wait for them to come to me. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, I went through the motions of normal life while wearing a wire and knowing that FBI agents were positioned around my property. Every phone call could be the setup for an ambush. Every visitor could be a potential assassin. Marcus had wanted to evacuate me to a safe house, but I'd insisted on staying at home. If Linda and Vincent were going to make a move, it would be on familiar ground where they felt confident and I appeared vulnerable. On the 4th night, they took the bait. I was in my home office, pretending to review documents while actually reading a mystery novel, when the security sensors detected movement near the back of the house. The FBI had installed additional surveillance equipment that would alert them to any intrusion, but I was on my own until they could respond. Linda appeared first, slipping through the French doors that led from my garden to the living room. She moved with practiced stealth, clearly familiar with my house's layout and security blind spots. Vincent followed a moment later, carrying what looked like a small medical bag. I remained in my office, but I could hear their whispered conversation through the thin walls. "Where would she hide it?" Vincent asked, his voice carrying a slight accent that hadn't been present when he was playing the role of ambitious assistant. "Probably in her home safe," Linda replied. "She keeps all her important documents there." "What's the combination?"
Her wedding anniversary. She's sentimental like that.
They moved through my house like they owned it, searching methodically for evidence that didn't exist. I could hear drawers being opened, papers being shuffled, and the occasional curse when they came up empty-handed. "Linda," Vincent said after 20 minutes of fruitless searching, "are you sure she has something? This could be a trap. She has to have something. How else would she know to switch the coffee cups?" "Maybe she got lucky." "No, Margaret's too smart for luck. She figured something out, and now she's planning to use it against us." The grudging respect in Linda's voice might have been flattering under different circumstances. Even after trying to murder me, she still recognized that she'd underestimated her business partner. "We need to find her," Vincent said. "Make her tell us where it is. And then we finish what we started." They found me exactly where I wanted them to, sitting in my home office with my back to the door, apparently absorbed in reading documents. Linda entered first, moving with the confidence of someone who thought she had the upper hand. "Hello, Margaret." I turned slowly, letting surprise and fear show on my face. "Linda, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to contact me." "We need to talk," Linda said while Vincent positioned himself near the door to block any escape attempt, "about the evidence you think you have." "I don't know what you mean." Vincent stepped forward, and I saw that he was holding a syringe. "Ms. Walsh, we know you have something that could hurt us. Tell us where it is, and this will be quick and painless." The mask was completely off now. Vincent's carefully practiced assistant persona had been replaced by something harder and more dangerous. This was Marcus Vaughn, professional killer, and he was done pretending to be anything else. "There is no evidence," I said, allowing my voice to shake with what appeared to be terror. "I made it up. I thought if people believed I had proof of my innocence, they might look more carefully at what really happened." Linda and Vincent exchanged glances. "You're lying," Linda said. "She's not," Vincent replied, studying my face with professional assessment. "She's telling the truth. There is no evidence." "Then why are we here?" "Because now we know for certain that she doesn't have anything on us, which means we can finish this properly." Vincent raised the syringe, and I saw my death reflected in his cold eyes. "Wait," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Before you kill me, I need to know something." "What? Was any of it real? Did Linda ever actually care about our partnership, or was this always about the money?" Linda's face twisted with something that might have been genuine emotion. "Margaret, she cared about your money." Vincent cut her off, just like I do. "Just like everyone who's ever pretended to respect you. It was all about the business you built and the wealth you accumulated." It was the cruelest thing he could have said, and it was exactly what I needed him to say. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for telling me the truth." Vincent frowned, confused by my response. That confusion lasted exactly long enough for the FBI agents to crash through every entrance to my office simultaneously. "FBI! Hands where we can see them!" The arrest was swift and efficient. Linda went down without a fight, but Vincent tried to use the syringe as a weapon before being tackled by Agent Sarah Martinez. The entire encounter was over in less than 30 seconds. As they read Linda and Vincent their rights, I sat in my chair and watched my business partner's life implode in real time. She looked at me with something between hatred and disbelief. "You set us up," she said. "You tried to murder me," I replied. "I just returned the favor." 8 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Marcus Vaughn receive 6 consecutive life sentences for the murders he'd committed across multiple states. The evidence against him was overwhelming: DNA, fingerprints, financial records, and most damning of all, the recorded confession he'd made in my home office. Linda received 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. As they led her away in shackles, she turned to look at me one last time. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The media had turned me from suspected murderer to heroic victim overnight. "Business executive helps FBI catch serial killer" was much better publicity than my original headlines, and the offers for book deals, movie rights, and interviews were pouring in. I declined them all. Some stories were too personal to share with the world. Marcus had done an excellent job managing the legal aftermath. All charges against me were dropped, my reputation was restored, and I was free to return to running my hotel empire. But running a business wasn't what interested me anymore. Using my considerable resources and Harrison's investigative connections, I'd spent the past 8 months systematically destroying every aspect of Linda and Vincent's criminal network. Their co-conspirators were arrested, their hidden assets were seized, and their reputations were obliterated so thoroughly that even their fellow inmates knew exactly what kind of monsters they were. Linda's gambling debts were still outstanding, and the people she owed money to weren't the forgiving type. Prison might actually be the safest place for her, though I'd made sure that information about her crimes and her betrayal of a lifelong friend had reached the right ears. 25 years was going to feel much longer when you were constantly looking over your shoulder. For Vincent, I'd arranged something special. The families of his previous victims had been very interested to learn about his location and daily routines. Prison justice operated by its own rules, and serial killers who targeted successful business owners weren't popular with the general population. But my greatest satisfaction came from my updated business structure. The Walsh Foundation for Entrepreneurship would inherit every penny of my corporate assets, ensuring that my life's work would be used to help ambitious young people build legitimate businesses rather than the criminal predators who'd tried to destroy me. Linda would inherit nothing except the knowledge that her greed had cost her everything. This morning I received a letter from Linda. It was full of apologies, explanations, and desperate pleas for forgiveness. She claimed that Vincent had manipulated her, that she never intended for things to go so far, that she still valued our friendship despite everything that had happened. I read the letter twice, then fed it into my fireplace shredder. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness. Some wounds never heal. Linda had chosen Vincent and his blood money over the partner who'd trusted her for 20 years. Now she could live with the consequences of that choice. As I sit here in my home office, looking out at the city lights that represent decades of successful business relationships and honest work, I feel something I haven't experienced in months: peace. My house feels like home again, no longer tainted by the presence of people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. The rooms echo with memories of better times, when partnerships meant something more than financial opportunity. I've hired a new management team, updated my security systems, and changed all the access codes. Linda's credentials no longer work anywhere in my business empire, and she'll never set foot in any of my properties again. My new corporate structure brings me daily satisfaction, knowing that every penny of my fortune will go to causes that matter rather than the greedy hands that tried to steal it through murder. The Walsh name will survive, but it will be associated with legitimate business success and charitable giving rather than the kind of corporate dysfunction that Linda and Vincent represented. Tonight, I'll pour myself a glass of wine and toast to justice served. Not the kind that comes from courtrooms and judges, but the kind that comes from refusing to be anyone's victim. Linda and Vincent thought they were dealing with a lonely businesswoman who could be easily manipulated and disposed of. They learned too late that Margaret Walsh hadn't survived 3 decades in the hospitality industry by being weak. Some people collect art or real estate. I collect the satisfaction of watching my enemies destroy themselves through their own greed and stupidity. And in that collection, Linda and Vincent's downfall will always hold a place of honor. Thank you for joining me on Margaret's incredible journey of survival and business warfare. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community so you never miss our latest true stories of victorious women who refuse to be victims. Remember, truth really is stranger than fiction, and every story deserves to be heard. Until next time, this is Her True Stories.